The Republic, Plato. Imagine ancient Greece around 380 BCE. Plato writes The Republic, a big philosophical what-if about justice, politics, and the ideal society. His mouthpiece is Socrates, who drops intellectual grenades like, what if rulers were chosen for wisdom, not wealth? And should people share property, even families, to avoid corruption? Bold stuff. It challenged traditional power, religion, and family structures. Fast forward to 20th century dictatorships. Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany weren't thrilled about a book teaching that rulers are accountable to reason, not divine right or brute force. Communal living? Questioning authority? That sounded way too close to socialism, democracy, and rebellion. So bam, it got banned. But suppression only magnified its impact. The Republic became a cornerstone of Western philosophy, blueprint for utopias, foundation for political science, endless fuel for debates on justice, censorship, and equality. Ironically, leaders burned it to keep people docile, yet the text still teaches us today how dangerous unchecked power can be. Plato wanted us to ask hard questions, and the fact dictators feared him proves he succeeded. On the Origin of Species, Charles Darwin. Published in 1859, Darwin's On the Origin of Species wasn't just science. It was a philosophical earthquake. Instead of humans being handcrafted by God in one divine weekend project, Darwin argued life evolved through natural selection, survival of traits best adapted to the environment. Translation? We're distant cousins with monkeys, fish, and possibly that weird lizard on your porch. The fallout? Explosive. In Victorian England, polite society gasped. Church leaders said Darwin had basically turned Adam and Eve into bad marketing mascots. Countries like Serbia, Greece, and later American school boards banned or restricted it, terrified it would unravel faith, morality, and the idea of humans being a special creation. But banning only amplified its power. Darwin's book became the intellectual starting pistol for modern biology, undermined rigid religious orthodoxy, and gave us the lens to understand medicine, genetics, and even pandemics. The long-term impact? People stopped seeing evolution as blasphemy and started seeing it as biology's backbone. In short, Darwin didn't just write about evolution. He triggered one in how humanity sees itself. Thus spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche. Written in the 1880s, Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra is less book and more existential rock concert. Instead of sermons about faith, he gave the world a prophet named Zarathustra who drops intellectual mic drops like, God is dead. Not declaring a corpse, but showing how traditional religion had lost its cultural grip. In its place, he announced the challenge for humanity. Create new values. Rise to become the Übermensch, the overhuman, who crafts meaning in a meaningless universe. Cue outrage. Churches called it blasphemy. Schools feared it would corrupt impressionable youth, and authoritarian regimes despised its insistence on individual freedom. The Nazis later cherry-picked and twisted Nietzsche's ideas to justify their ideology, even though his philosophy was deeply anti-authoritarian. That distortion actually got it banned in places that viewed it as dangerous propaganda, while the church just flat-out considered it poison to faith. Yet the legacy? Monumental. Zarathustra influenced literature, psychology, existentialism, and even modern pop culture. It's one of those works people often debate more than they read, but its aftershocks remain. Nietzsche wanted readers to tear down old idols and build meaning themselves. The fact both dictators and priests try to silence him shows just how loud his voice still echoes. The Social Contract, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Published in 1762, Rousseau's The Social Contract was the intellectual equivalent of throwing a Molotov cocktail into European monarchies. His pitch: political authority should come from the consent of the governed, not from divine right or hereditary crowns. Translation: kings aren't special snowflakes. People make the rules, governments serve citizens, and sovereignty belongs to everyone. That was revolutionary, literally. Monarchies across Europe were horrified. France banned it on release. Geneva and Holland confiscated copies, and Rousseau himself fled into exile. Why? Because the book basically handed revolutionaries an instruction manual. If rulers don't uphold the general will, the people can overthrow them. In a world still bowing to thrones and altars, that was dynamite. The fallout echoed long after. The Social Contract became a key text behind the French Revolution, shaping ideas of democracy, equality, and modern republicanism. Sure, Rousseau's idea of collective will can look a little scary when twisted into mob rule, but its long-term effect? A cornerstone for modern democratic theory. Every politician quoting the will of the people owes Rousseau, even the ones who'd rather burn his book to ashes. Critique of Pure Reason, Immanuel Kant. Released in 1781, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason isn't light reading. It's basically a philosophical IKEA manual. Endless parts, no clear diagram, and at the end you're not sure if you build a chair or a spaceship. But its big mission was bold, to map out the limits of human knowledge. Kant asked, what can we truly know, and what lies forever beyond reason? His answer split reality into the world as we experience it, phenomena, and the unknowable reality beneath, noumena. Mind-bending then, mind-bending now. Fast forward. Soviet Russia tossed it into the forbidden pile during Stalin's reign. Why? It was branded too bourgeois and idealist, philosophy that dared to explore free thought outside strict Marxist materialism. Anything undermining the state's monopoly on truth was seen as ideological sabotage. Yet banning didn't bury it. The critique reshaped philosophy, birthing German idealism, setting the stage for Hegel, Schopenhauer, and basically half of modern thought. Today it still looms like Mount Everest for philosophers. Intimidating, slippery, but essential. If Plato asked how we should live, Kant asked how we can even know, and the fact empires try to silence him prove his answers rattled more than a few thrones. On Liberty, John Stuart Mill. Published in 1859, John Stuart Mill's On Liberty is basically the ultimate manifesto of individuality, the 19th century equivalent of tattooing "Don't tread on me" across your brain. Mill argued that the health of society depends on protecting freedom of thought, speech, and lifestyle choices, even if someone's ideas are weird, unpopular, or offensive. His point? Silencing one person robs the world of potential truth, or at least the clash of ideas that makes truth stronger. Naturally, this gave governments hives. Monarchies, theocracies, and more authoritarian states weren't thrilled about a book telling people, hey, maybe question your rulers, or that religion controlling you. Various regimes banned or restricted it, essentially saying, too much freedom causes headaches, rebellions, or both. But here's the kicker. On Liberty never disappeared. Instead, it became the backbone of modern liberal democracy, cited whenever debates hit free speech, civil rights, or government censorship. If you've ever tweeted something edgy, protested in public, or even argued against the status quo without risking jail, you're living in Mill's legacy. The book didn't just defend freedom, it made freedom contagious. The Prince, Niccolò Machiavelli. Written in 1513, The Prince is the Renaissance's version of a cheat code manual for politics. Machiavelli stripped away moral fluff and said straight out, rulers survive not by being good, but by being cunning, feared, and ruthless when necessary. He advised princes to fake virtue, break promises if useful, and keep power by any means, basically the original 48 laws of power. The Catholic Church immediately saw a problem. A book telling rulers how to manipulate, deceive, and consolidate control that didn't fit with Christian ideals of mercy and virtue. So in 1559, The Prince was dropped onto the index of prohibited books. Publicly, monarchs and clergy denounced it as dangerous poison to morality. Privately, rulers devoured it like a Game of Thrones script, underlining passages on how to handle enemies, allies, and unruly subjects. The irony, what the church hoped to bury became one of the most influential political texts ever. It shifted politics from lofty ideals to cold realism, shaping statecraft for centuries. Even today, when someone calls a leader Machiavellian, they're basically saying, congrats, you graduated from the school of power, dirty tricks degree in hand. The Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Published in 1848, the Communist Manifesto is the ultimate pamphlet with attitude, a rebellion starter pack written in fiery prose. Marx and Engels laid it out plain. History is a class struggle, capitalism exploits workers, and the solution isn't tweaking the system, it's overthrowing it. Picture it as a 19th century tutorial level for Revolution Simulator. Unite, rebel, redistribute. Naturally, ruling elites were not fans. Capitalist governments across Europe and beyond saw it as a direct threat to their grip on power. Copies were banned, burned, and censored. Possession alone could get you surveilled, jailed, or worse. It became the political equivalent of contraband fireworks, small, cheap, and explosive. But ideas don't burn easily. This slim manifesto lit sparks that grew into communism, socialism, labor movements, and revolutions around the globe. From the Russian upheavals of 1917 to 20th century independence struggles shaped by Marxist rhetoric. Whether praised as liberation or blamed for tyranny, its impact is undeniable. The irony? The book that governments fought hardest to silence is still one of the most widely read manifestos on Earth, a pocket-sized bomb that keeps going off in history. Discourse on Method, René Descartes. Published in 1637, René Descartes' discourse on method looks innocent at first glance. After all, it gave us the catchy line, "I think, therefore I am." But beneath that slogan, Descartes was sneaking in a radical shift. Instead of grounding knowledge in scripture or church authority, he built it from doubt, reason, and mathematics. Essentially, let's strip everything down to what we can absolutely know and build science from there. In 17th century Europe, that was medieval smack talk. The Catholic Church wasn't impressed. By sidelining God as the formal starting point of knowledge, Descartes looked like he was setting up reason as the new religion. His logical method was branded dangerous skepticism, so his works landed on the index of forbidden books. To censoring authorities, it seemed like an intellectual gateway drug. First doubt miracles, then doubt hierarchy, then doubt the church itself. Yet banning only amplified his influence. The discourse became a cornerstone of modern philosophy, fueling rationalism, inspiring scientific inquiry, and legitimizing the idea that the human mind can chart reality without divine babysitting. Descartes didn't just say, "I think, therefore I am." He made Europe start thinking in a whole new way. The Open Society and Its Enemies, Karl Popper. Published in 1945, Karl Popper's The Open Society and Its Enemies is essentially a 2-volume intellectual roast. He took aim at Plato for dreaming up rigid utopias, Hegel for his abstract spirit of history, and Marx for turning prophecy into politics. Popper's argument? These thinkers planted seeds of totalitarianism by elevating grand historical destinies over individual freedom. Strip away the footnotes, and he's saying, ideas that worship the collective too much usually end in barbed wire and secret police. So, no surprise, communist regimes weren't fans. In Stalin's USSR and beyond, the book was treated like contraband because it exposed the philosophical vulnerabilities propping up authoritarianism. Anywhere busy glorifying the inevitable march of history, Popper was the killjoy yelling, "That road ends in dictatorship." The long-term impact? Immense. Popper's work fortified the case for liberal democracy and influenced policymakers during the Cold War who needed a philosophical counterweight to Marxism. Today, it still resonates whenever someone questions creeping authoritarian trends. The fact that oppressive governments tried to erase it only confirmed Popper's thesis. Closed societies can't stand the light. Essays on the Freedom of the Will, Arthur Schopenhauer. Published in 1839, Schopenhauer's essay on the freedom of the will takes human optimism, shoves it out the window, and locks the door. His thesis? Free will is an illusion. Every thought, choice, and action isn't a product of freedom, but of prior causes. Your nature, your instincts, and the world's chain of events. In other words, you didn't choose that cup of coffee this morning. The universe chose it through you. Pretty bleak stuff. Not surprisingly, religious authorities hated it. Christianity especially insists on free will, since judgment, sin, and salvation depend on the idea that people can choose right from wrong. Schopenhauer's stance effectively said, "Sorry, your moral system is running on fake news." That made his work suspect, controversial, and in some circles, outright suppressed. But long-term, it cracked open huge debates in philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience about determinism, morality, and human responsibility. Modern science still wrestles with Schopenhauer's challenge every time brain scans show decisions forming before conscious thought. So, while his essay turned theologians pale, it became a cornerstone for anyone exploring the mechanics of mind. Call it the gothcore anthem of philosophy. Dark, uncompromising, and impossible to ignore. An inquiry concerning human understanding, David Hume. Published in 1748, David Hume's Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding is basically philosophy's velvet glove slap to religious certainty. Hume questioned how we know anything, pointing out that cause and effect isn't something we see, but a habit of expectation. And when it came to miracles, he was positively Scottish about it. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And let's be real, the evidence is flimsy. Translation: miracles are probably nonsense. The church, predictably, wasn't tickled. Calling miracles unreliable undermined key biblical events, from parting seas to resurrection. For defenders of faith, this was dynamite aimed at the pillars of Christianity. No surprise it ended up on banned lists and drew accusations of dangerous skepticism. But the long-term outcome? Massive impact. Hume became a hero of Enlightenment empiricism, inspiring later giants like Kant, who literally said Hume woke him from his dogmatic slumber. Today, his cool logic echoes in science, skepticism, and debates about religion. The modern mantra, "extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence," is straight out of his playbook. So while the church tried to silence him, Hume's polite doubt still shapes how we separate fact from fairy tale. Ethics demonstrated in geometrical order, Baruch Spinoza. Written in the 1600s and published posthumously in 1677, Spinoza's ethics looks like Euclid went wild with philosophy. Every proposition stacked like a mathematical proof. And the proof he built? Pantheism. God isn't some bearded guy in the sky. God is nature, the universe itself, with no miracles, no chosen people, no divine micromanagement. For Jews and Christians alike, this was heresy on steroids. The fallout was brutal. At 23, Spinoza was excommunicated from the Jewish community in Amsterdam with curses so fierce they practically invented cancel culture. Christian authorities weren't kinder. His writings were censored, condemned, and locked away because they flattened the boundary between the divine and the natural. Basically, Spinoza managed to offend nearly everyone with a stake in organized religion. And yet, his long-term impact is enormous. Ethics influenced Enlightenment thinkers, laid foundations for modern democracy, inspired secularism, and prefigured today's science-friendly spirituality. Einstein himself quipped he believed in Spinoza's God. Not personal, just the beauty of cosmic law. So yes, Spinoza was the first philosopher to be canceled by multiple religions at once. But history flipped the script. The heretic became a prophet of modern thought. Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes. Published in 1651 during the chaos of England's civil wars, Hobbes' Leviathan is political philosophy written like a survival manual. Hobbes painted a grim picture of human nature. Without government, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. His fix? A strong, centralized authority, the Leviathan, to keep everyone from tearing each other apart. Basically, surrender some freedom for order or society collapses. But here's the twist. Hobbes grounded his argument in reason and social contracts, not in God's will. His Leviathan wasn't divinely ordained, just practical. The church bristled, banning the book for presenting a secularized godlight, while monarchs weren't entirely thrilled either. Hobbes admitted rulers only keep power because people let them. Take away consent, and even kings look fragile. That double-sided jab made him persona non grata to both throne and altar. The aftermath? Controversy, sure, but also one of the most influential blueprints for modern political science and constitutional design. Hobbes helped invent the language of social contracts, inspiring Locke, Rousseau, and every civics class since. Ironically, the book that got banned for undermining authority also became the intellectual skeleton every government still wrestles with today. The Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir. Published in 1949, Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex detonated like a philosophical firecracker in the middle of post-war patriarchy. With forensic detail, Beauvoir dissected how society had cast women as the second sex, defined only in relation to men, treated as mothers, wives, or objects instead of autonomous individuals. Her message? Biology isn't destiny. Women aren't made. They're socially constructed into submission. Translation: time to rewrite the rules. The reaction was volcanic. In France, it was scandalous. In Catholic countries, it was outright banned. Why? Because Beauvoir dared to treat marriage, motherhood, and traditional gender roles not as sacred duties, but as social traps. It turned the holy aura around family life into a philosophical punching bag, which made church leaders feel like she just burned their instruction manual. But the long-term impact is epic shifting. The second sex became the philosophical foundation of modern feminism, fueling second-wave movements, reshaping debates on gender equality, and inspiring thinkers across the globe. What began as banned blasphemy is now a cornerstone of women's rights, and Beauvoir's line, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman," still echoes like a battle cry.